Hello, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us for our Friday. We're going to be discussing FOIAs, Immigration 101, and why these FOIAs are so important. What are FOIAs and how many are there? The who, what, when, and the why. Today, we have our awesome managing attorney who is going to be giving us all this fabulous information, a little bit about our attorney, if you haven't already heard. She's been licensed since 2008, founded the firm in November 2009. So last month was our 12th year anniversary. Whoop, whoop. She is a board certified immigration attorney, so she does know her stuff. And whenever she's not running a firm, she is writing books. So she is the author of Build and Manage a Successful Immigration Law Practice Without Losing Your Mind. Very good read, and 10 recommend. I'll let Attorney Powers take it away with the learning objectives for today's presentation.
All right, so Freedom of Information Act request. You might have never heard of this, but it's basically asking for a copy of something about you or a close person that relation to you from a government agency. There's usually a FOIA from anywhere. You can ask for FOIAs just for fun, but that takes time and it's sort of anyway. But the one thing I will tell you is that a lot of people think, like, let me tell you, I'm a Mythbuster 101 here. A lot of people think that I can just Google what happened to you, or there's some back database so that I, a private immigration attorney, can go figure out what happened to you in the past. I can't. Sorry about that. I can't. That's the reason why we have these FOIAs, unfortunately, but we need them. That they're a beautiful thing, but they exist because we can't do that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, like there's a lot of confidentiality and procedures, like a lot of policies they want to protect for foreign governments, but also mostly for confidentiality for your client, your information. So for the most part, so there's no way for me to just go in and like find some database and Google what happened to you. So the other big thing I want you to take away, and I'm sort of giving you the big stuff at the beginning, but one of the other big things is that keep a copy of anything that happens to you in your immigration journey up until becoming a citizen. Even as a citizen, just go ahead and keep it just for fun. Just keep it somewhere safe, copy it, put it in a safe or something, just in case you need it for one day. But basically, if anything happens to you or someone that could affect your case, you need to keep a copy of it. Now, if you don't have a copy, you didn't keep it, for some reason it gets destroyed, hurricanes, floods, things like that, we get it. Or you were a kid, you didn't have any control over it, you don't know, or whatever, you get detained at the airport, or the border, you didn't keep a copy, you didn't have a copy, you don't know. That's why these FOIAs exist, right? Okay, so what is a FOIA? It's a Freedom of Information Act request, and you're asking for a copy of your file or some document. A background check is something else, FBI background check, but we'll talk about that. So who has which docs and what are the exemptions to FOIA, which basically means how does the government get out of giving you something that you ask for? And then there's some talk about criminal records. So the Freedom of Information Act is to ensure informed citizens vital to a functioning and democratic society. That's true. I mean, a lot of times we can even FOIA what is the policy procedure training manual for asylum office or for CBP or whatever. Like a lot of attorneys and advocacy groups FOIA these things, but that's like a whole nother conversation. So what we're talking about is your individual case. So this exists, and this is the thing. I'm going to tell you another key point, lots of good nuggets. What I've noticed when people go to certain attorneys who are not as experienced, or maybe notarios or people who don't do immigration on a regular basis, they don't know all the places that you can do FOIAs for. Like they might just do it for one agency, and then if they don't get anything, they think, oh, you're good. But that's not the case. Like knowing about FOIAs and using them to be a detective, it takes a certain amount of skill, knowledge, and experience. And so that's another thing I want you to take away. So first of all, there is no some magic database that private attorneys can go get into. 2, keep a copy of all your stuff all the time, somewhere safe so you can use it or maybe help a relative for their case. And 3, not all advocates, attorneys know how to go to the maze of FOIA and how to best advocate, which ones to do and how to get the answer, when to appeal and when to go deeper. So those are really key points that I'm giving you at the beginning of this. But anyway, so the federal agencies are required to disclose any information requested on the FOIA unless it falls under one of those 9 exemptions, which we're going to get to, which protects interests of personal privacy, national security, and law enforcement. Okay, and let me just tell you, not only do I know a lot about FOIAs, and I've spoken to other attorneys about FOIAs for like Lawline and other presentations, but I even toured a cave in the middle of Lee Summit, Missouri, because I wanted to learn more about FOIAs, and that's where they keep a lot of our files for USCIS. So I can talk about FOIAs. All right, so USCIS. Now, March 2003, I know this because I was in DC, is the creation of the Committee on Homeland Security, or the Department of Homeland Security, because I worked for the Committee on Homeland Security in 2004. But anyway, what does that mean? Well, it means that we don't have INS anymore. That was the Immigration Nationality Service. So sometimes people call it INS. So then this is why it really depends on when you need records from, which one, who holds them, because these agencies got a little bit all jumbled up when there was that change back in 2003. So you go to USCIS when you need a copy of previous applications. Maybe you filed an I-130 with a notario or on your own, and now you're like, you need to move forward with it, but you don't know what day they said you entered, or what, whether you were married or not. You don't know what happened. So if you go to USCIS when you need a copy of previous applications or communication with USCIS, I've done FOIA sometimes because the person was denied, but they never got the denial notice, and they need to know why so that they can respond back and have a better strategy when they apply for the next application. So this is another important thing. When there's a removal, detention, deportation records before 2000, you go to USCIS. Doesn't sound intuitive, but this is another important point. And you need to have your name, your A number, your date of birth, and valid photo ID. When we last checked, it was taking 6 to 9 months. I mean, it's always a complaint that they take a long time. But, one other big takeaway is that you should appeal if it comes back blank, because maybe there was something and they just didn't look hard enough. So this is something I'd use for a strategy for almost every FOIA. Not necessarily USCIS, it's usually more for CBP ICE situations. Okay, so little drawbacks could be if you don't know what your A number is, or if you don't know, something like that. But generally, if you applied for USCIS, you had a valid reason to do it, and you need a copy of it. This also could be very applicable for 245I provisions when you need a copy of that I-130 or I-140 that was filed back in the day that makes you potentially eligible. So, and you usually need to get the authority from the person who's the petitioner or beneficiary, if you're not the beneficiary, to get that FOIA. So great place to get records. Okay, immigration EOIR, Executive Office of Immigration Review, is another place that you can get the court orders, charging documents, notice to appear, court decisions. Now they've made this online. I think recently there's a portal. Before, I mean, even just recently, we're still getting like CDs, which a lot of our laptops don't take CDs anymore. So we have to figure that out. But anyway, you want to keep a copy. If you're in removal proceedings, you want to have a copy of everything. So we've been getting hired by a lot of people who are changing attorneys, or maybe the attorney doesn't do court anymore, or what have you. And so we have to do these FOIAs if the record is not complete. So this is something that's very important, but you can apply online and we can get things a little bit faster. Another point that I want to mention here is that you can expedite the request, especially if you have a court hearing coming up soon. And you can you just have to make a note of it, and it goes to another tier. I think it's like tier 3 or something like that. But basically you're telling them that it's, I need it soon, please. I have a court hearing, and you show proof of that. So the next one that we commonly do, and I'm not giving you a list on all the FOIAs because you can pretty much FOIA any agency, right? Customs and Border Patrol is another place, and this is if you had an interaction at the border and we're concerned about it. So apprehension, detention at the border, interactions with CBP at the border in or outside the US, I-94 records, entries, exits, voluntary return, expedited removal, advanced parole. So those are the things that you would be checking. If those are things you need, this is where you would ask them for. So you want the name and the entry of name at the time of entry. Why does that matter? Well, sometimes people give different names, and or they have different versions of their name or something like that. So it is tied to name and date of birth. So if you give a name that's different than what they have on the record, or a different date of birth, then this could be a very, well, you might not get a result, which is why you need to look long and hard, and maybe you need to do an OBIM FOIA, which is coming up before you do the CBP FOIA, so that you can figure out what name was given, version of the name to help guide them. Now, it could take 4 to 20 weeks, which is a long time. And a lot of times people don't know what the A number was given. They might not have had an A number, or it was just given to them in their documents and they never got to see it. But this is usually where CBP FOIAs are really where we need them, because we're trying to figure out what damage was done at that encounter and if we can overcome it and how to overcome it. So with ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, interactions with ICE, CBIS records, ICE arrest records, I-213, detention records, bond requests for ICE detainers or warrants. You would need your name and your A number again. You've seen a trend here, right? Date of birth and the date and place of apprehension, preferably an ID if you have one. This can take 10 to 15 weeks, maybe more. And if you are detained or in immigration court and you need the I-213, you might be able to get it from the opposing or government counsel, or something along those lines. So you might be able to find another way, but this is, you might be able to expedite it if you are in proceedings and you need it sooner. So this is where you go. Now, the OBIM is the one I was talking about earlier. So Office of Biometrics Identity Management. So, okay, what did we talk about so far? A lot of those you need a name and a date of birth. But here, you use fingerprints. And so this helps you if you don't know what the name was given before, or maybe the date of birth was wrong. So if you had an interaction with CBP and where a fingerprint or photo was taken, this could be a good place to do this so that you can get a record. You can you put as much information you have, but it's tied to fingerprints. And so in theory, only one person has those set of fingerprints. And so the record should be accurate, but we have seen where people's, it could be a little bit wrong, but sometimes you do the OBIM FOIA and then later you go do another FOIA when you get this information. So sometimes when we're playing detective, we got to do one, wait for it, get it, then do another one, wait for it, and then we can build a strategy. I will tell you, a lot of times people get excited because their child's turning 21, or somebody in their family's become, their parent or whatever, somebody's becoming a citizen. That's not the time to do FOIA. The time to do the FOIA is like about a year before you want to do whatever you want to do, because you come to me when your kid turns 21 and you had an interaction at the border, like it's going to take us another 6 or 8 months to do all these FOIAs potentially. And we wasted that time. So I'm just letting you know, let's try to come about a year early. If you had anything that you don't have records on, it's a little bit messy, you need to take a look at it. So next one is Department of State. Now, Department of State, this one, they like to hold their records close to them. So it can be difficult, but in theory, you can get maybe your visa application, passport application, but I found that that can be difficult and they like to redact a lot of things and take a long time. So really don't do DOSs unless you really, really have to. And but you might find something that you can really use and you need it, and so then you gotta have to wait. So this could be like if you have some question about person citizenship or what you said on a visa application, or maybe somebody is as a consular birthright or abroad, or you're trying something along those lines. Okay, so what are the exemptions? Well, normally this is sort of like legal high level, but I'm just going to let you know, because this is some of the times if you do a FOIA your own, or maybe you attorneys, like there's not a lot of stuff on this FOIA. Well, it could say these numbers like 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. But basically, these are the reasons why they can redact things. And so when I did my tour of the cave, basically if a request comes in, they go find it. They're using barcodes for everything based off the A number, right? And then somebody, it sits on someone's desk after it's scanned. So then they have to scan it if it wasn't already scanned before, and they have these really fancy, cool scanners. And then somebody has to sit down and review painstakingly the entire file, right? Can you believe this? And then black out whatever is an exemption. So that's where the delay comes from. It's not like that they don't know where it is and they can't scan it fast enough. It's just that the human element of having to scan for exemptions. So protected by national security, internal personnel, prohibited disclosure by another federal law, communications between agencies, law enforcement, geological information on wells. But I don't see that exemption, but privileged communications, things like that. Okay. Now, so what is an FBI background check and when do you need to do it? So FBI background check is generally used, it's used also with the fingerprint little sheet, right? And then there's your name and whatever information, date of birth and stuff like that, photo ID. It can take maybe 10 to 18 weeks. A lot of these processing times varied a lot during COVID, so don't hold us to it. But the biggest thing we use these for is when a person knew they had a criminal record, but they don't know where. They don't know what happened with it in the end. And this doesn't happen very often. They don't have any clue because, but if you don't, this is a good place. And then when we figure that out, we go and we try to get the criminal records directly from that location. So this also can be helpful if you want to know what is on your record. I will tell you that there also are points on here that might say notable scars or tattoos. And so if a person has a tattoo that could be gang related and later gets it removed or something else put on it, this also could be on your record later on if you're doing consular processing and they're trying to make note if you have any interactions be inadmissible due to activity with gangs. So, that's a little very quirky, high level situation, but it is something to know. So FBI background, basically to help you know your record with the criminal record, especially if you don't already know where your crimes might be on record, or just want to know what's on your file. One other random note I'll mention is that if you had something expunged, and you're like, yay, it's expunged, it shouldn't be on here. Sometimes it's still on the record because it can take a while for it to fall off. But other side note, expungements doesn't mean it doesn't exist for immigration records, and it still could be a conviction, unfortunately. So things to know. All right. Now, criminal records, state and federal, like we just said, maybe you do the FBI because you're like, I don't know where that arrest came. I don't know, it was a long time ago. So then we do that. But, if you have a general idea, you can start going to those counties specifically and trying to get your police clearance record. We see this anything from naturalization. Someone's goes to their interview and they're like, I had an arrest back in 97 from Ohio. Well, give me your police clearance record or the criminal record so I know that it's all good. So that's your burden to prove. So, you need to know how to sort of basically meander through the criminal records, state and federal. If you were arrested once, you know the disposition, get copies of these things, arrest records, indictments, outcomes, plea agreements, all this good stuff. We need to know, we need to have it because the government might ask it, and we also need to see how it impacts your case. Here in Harris County, we have a nice little database we can go on. We can usually do lots of searches right there and find out the record. But when things are old or disappear after a long time, then they make it a little more difficult and you might have to go downtown to get the microfiche or something like that. Okay, so the gist of this is all about you need information to figure out your future. You need to know what happened in the past. Punto. That's the idea, right? And there's no Google Doc place I can go to figure this stuff out. I have to do it through a series of being detective with FOIAs. So the more you keep records, the more you keep these files, the more you have them when you find an attorney, the better off you are. Otherwise, we're going to have to spend some months doing this. And so, but the good thing is we know how to find stuff. We know how to meander and navigate through these FOIAs. So you're in good hands if you need our help. All right, Dana, I think I talked enough about FOIAs, even though